I never thought I'd spend nearly $200,000 just to be excluded from a party, especially when I was the one who paid for everything. But that's exactly what happened. And it all began with what seemed like a simple decision: gifting my sister an apartment for her wedding. The apartment was on the 11th floor in downtown Atlanta, overlooking Piedmont Park. Not huge, but bright, fully furnished with high-end finishes, walnut flooring, and granite countertops. I'd bought it last Black Friday and transferred the deed to Madison, my sister, just a week before her engagement party, with a guy named Chase. They'd been together for over a year, and I, the one orchestrating every detail behind the scenes, kept telling myself this was the right thing to do. From the Vera Wang wedding dress flown in from New York to the private tasting at a renowned French restaurant in Midtown, even the contract with a photographer who once shot for a Grammy-winning artist. Every expense landed on my credit card. I didn't hesitate, not because I had money to burn, but because I believed I was investing in family happiness. I was 38, never married, and since our parents passed away, Madison was the only real family I had. I'd worked in real estate investment for almost 15 years. In the early days, I'd lived off instant noodles for 3 months just to scrape together the down payment on my first property. Emily, my wife, stood by me when all I had were wild ideas and a rusty pickup. She believed in me when no one else would. She's the reason I now have a 6-figure savings account and the freedom to buy a wedding apartment without blinking. So when Madison announced her black tie wedding at a secluded lakefront resort, I nodded. When she said she needed a custom gown with over 500 hand-sewn crystals, I agreed. When Chase wanted to invite 20 extra guests from his golf club, I increased the budget. Each time I swiped my card, I reminded myself, family matters more than money. Still, there were moments that gave me pause. One time, I suggested Emily join us for a tasting. Madison smirked. She doesn't really need to worry about fine dining, right? I let it slide. I told myself she was just stressed about wedding planning. Another time, my 8-year-old daughter Abby eagerly showed Madison the dress she'd wear as the flower girl. Madison glanced at it and said, "That color looks kind of country, don't you think?" I was ready to say something, but Emily gently squeezed my hand under the table. She just smiled and told Abby she'd be the prettiest little princess at the party. I chose to believe everything would turn out fine, because she was my sister, because I had invested not just money, but hope and loyalty into this wedding. I had once told Emily this would be a day Madison would never forget. I was right, just not in the way I expected. That dinner happened at a rooftop Italian restaurant in the heart of Buckhead. I thought Madison invited me to say thank you, or at least share a moment before her big day. Instead, what I got was a cold slap across the face. Madison was nearly 20 minutes late. She walked in wearing an emerald silk dress, hair in loose curls, French perfume trailing behind her like she owned the skyline. She sat down and lifted her wine glass before I even greeted her. Her first words, "I just called the designer to change the photo booth layout. The old background looked too cheap." I gave a polite smile and nodded. I was used to it. My sister always fixated on appearances. But then, as I flipped through the menu, she said, "It light as air. Oh, by the way, don't bring Emily or the kids tomorrow." I looked up. It felt like someone had drained all the oxygen from the room. Come again? Still glued to her phone, she replied evenly, "She just doesn't fit the wedding vibe. You know, white, black, gold accents, all finance and media folks, even an exec flying in from Miami. And Emily, well," she paused, then smiled, trying to sound gentle. "She's a little too Midwest." I set the menu down. Midwest was Madison's code word for plain, unsophisticated. Emily grew up in a small Missouri town. She didn't wear designer gowns or understand French sauces, but she was kind, resilient, and had never once hesitated to give everything to my family. And now she was being excluded for not fitting into the polished mold Madison invented? "You're saying my wife's not classy enough to attend your wedding?" Madison chuckled softly, unfazed. "It's not that she's not classy. She just doesn't match the aesthetic. Everything I've curated, branding, media, the concept, It all has to be consistent. A Vogue photographer is coming, and the kids, Abby and Noah, you get it, right? They'd just throw off the visuals. Heat surged to my temples, not because of her insult, but her indifference. You're talking about your niece and nephew like they're set props. She sighed, shrugged. Don't overreact. I just want my big day to be perfect. That's not so wrong, is it? My hands clenched under the table. With warm lights and soft Italian music swirling around us, I had the urge to smash my wine glass right then and there. So you'll take my money but not my family? Madison smiled faintly. You're my big brother. Everyone knows you're generous. Plus, this is just part of your role. I looked straight into her eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't see the little girl who once cried in my arms over a broken toy. I saw a woman who lived in the illusion that everything given to her was owed by default. I lifted my glass, drained it in one motion, and stood. Tomorrow you'll get exactly what you want, a wedding to remember. Madison chuckled. I knew you'd understand. I said nothing. As I walked out of the restaurant, I slipped my phone from my jacket pocket. The first call wasn't to Emily, or a friend, or a lawyer. It was to Isaac, an event logistics specialist I'd worked with 2 years ago. Sharp, discreet, and never asked too many questions. I need you to arrange a few things for a wedding tomorrow, I said plainly. A pause, then Isaac replied with calm amusement. Looking to make a statement? I smirked. No, Isaac. I'm looking to teach someone a lesson. Elegantly. I left the restaurant with slow, measured steps, like nothing had happened. But in my head, every detail was already falling into place. The anger inside me no longer flared. It froze, precise as a blade. Madison had no idea that by cutting my family out of her day, she had just erased herself from mine. I got into the car, shut the door without starting the engine. Scrolling through my contacts, I landed on one name, Isaac Rowe, a man who could turn any backyard into a Met Gala tier production. More importantly, he owed me. Big time. I once rescued his failing project with a single lease negotiation. The call lasted under 2 minutes. I didn't need to explain much. Isaac understood silence. My team will be there in the morning. How much polish are we aiming for, he asked. Just enough to make it unforgettable, but not so far we get sued, I replied. Isaac laughed, low and amused. Got it. Then let's start with something visually disruptive. I turned off the engine and leaned my head back against the seat. Outside, the city lights flickered across the windshield. A part of me still wanted to forgive. Not because Madison deserved it, but because I once loved that little sister like my own life. But even loyalty has a breaking point. Madison hadn't just insulted Emily. She had shattered the most sacred thing in me, family. Memories rushed in. The day I introduced Emily to my family, Madison mocked her dress as a high-end flea market knockoff. When Abby was born, Madison brought flowers to the hospital. Then asked, Are you sure that kid's yours? She doesn't look like anyone. I bit my tongue. I kept believing she would change, but sometimes enough small cuts can become a wound that never heals. That night, I sat in my third-floor office, the one with the window overlooking the pine trees in our backyard. Emily walked in carrying 2 cups of peppermint tea. She didn't ask what had happened. She just sat beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder. Like always. Is there something I should know? She asked softly. I looked at her. This woman once scrubbed rental floors with me during the startup years. She sold her mother's engagement ring so I could pay my employees. She never asked for anything, but gave me everything. Nothing serious, I replied. I just think Madison's finally going to get a gift that matches how she treats this family. Emily paused, then nodded. As long as you don't destroy yourself doing it. I squeezed her hand gently. I don't need to destroy. I just need to shine a light in the right place. The next morning, I still showed up to the wedding as planned. My suit was custom, midnight blue, black leather belt, an old Tag Heuer Emily gave me on our 3rd anniversary. I stepped out of the car alone, just as Madison had requested. But I carried a quiet smile, because I knew this wedding would be remembered longer than any speech ever could. Isaac and his crew had arrived early, disguising everything as part of the original event setup. No one from the official team noticed a thing. A large white-painted wooden box had been placed behind the main stage area, disguised as a gift from a corporate sponsor. Madison had likely seen it but paid no attention. She was too consumed with the fantasy she built. I gave no speech. I didn't walk up to the podium. I simply sat in the second row, hands folded, eyes fixed on the glowing bride beneath the chandelier lights. Now it was my turn to return my wedding gift. The wedding took place at a restored mansion in the Alpharetta suburbs, where Madison had rented the entire property for the weekend. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and every guest received a calligraphed place card. Everything exuded the lavish image my sister had chased for years. And I, the one who made it all happen, walked in unnoticed. I chose a seat near the center aisle. My face remained neutral, offering only brief nods as guests passed by. No one asked about Emily or the kids. Perhaps they had already heard Madison's scripted excuses, something like, "They're sick," or "Emily had work she couldn't reschedule." The music began, soft piano blended with violin from a live band. All guests stood as Madison appeared at the entrance, her white lace mermaid gown shimmering, a crystal tiara glinting under the lights. Her eyes scanned the crowd and paused momentarily on me. She smiled faintly, as if everything were perfect. She had no idea the storm was already forming, right in the heart of her dream. Halfway down the aisle, a staff member wheeled a large white box with a gold ribbon into the center of the ballroom. On its lid, "With all my love." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I heard someone murmur, "Gabriel sent a surprise gift." A woman exclaimed, "Must be antiques or a luxury crystal collection." Another guessed, "Probably rare jewelry." Madison froze, her face lit up with delight. She tilted her head, smiled brightly, then waved a bridesmaid over. "Go ahead, open it, let's see what Gabriel said." The girl stepped forward, gently tugged the ribbon. The latch popped, the lid opened slowly, and Madison's world detonated. The first sound was a heavy flap of wings, then a low, drawn-out squawk. 6 fully grown mallard ducks, large, glossy-feathered, each tagged with a number, burst from the box, wings flapping as they ran across the ballroom. One smacked into the wedding cake, nearly toppling the 3 tiers. Another darted into the floral arch, knocking loose white petals across the floor. The musty smell of wet feathers quickly filled the air. Screams erupted. Someone dropped a glass of champagne, a child cried, guests scrambled from their seats as the ducks flailed around the room in chaos. Madison stood frozen in the aisle, gripping her gown. One duck caught its foot in her veil, yanking it as it flapped wildly, nearly dragging her off balance. Chase, her groom, ran to catch her, his face a mix of panic and disbelief. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, scanning the room for answers. I rose from my seat, walking toward the center calmly, my face steady. I nodded toward Isaac's assistant, who stood ready near the stage. He tapped a small remote on his wrist. Instantly, the room went silent. The music stopped. Every head turned. A woman's voice echoed through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy a special presentation in honor of Madison Carter's big day." The lights dimmed. The main screen at the back of the ballroom flickered on. A single line appeared in bold letters. "The truth is always the most valuable gift." I turned to face Madison, her lips parted, eyes wide. "You did this?" she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't respond, because this wasn't the end. This was just the first thread being pulled from the mask she had worn for years. The real gift was yet to be opened. The frenzy from the ducks hadn't even settled when the ceiling lights suddenly cut out. All sound seemed to collapse. Guests exchanged confused glances. Some assumed it was part of the show. But Madison's face turned pale, her eyes scanning for me with a look that betrayed pure fear. On the LED screen, new visuals began to play. Not the planned slideshow of engagement photos, but a short video that opened with bold white letters. "Everything has a price." Soft music played. Then a recorded voice came through. Madison's, crisp and unmistakable. "Emily? Sweet, yeah, but painfully rustic." She gives off serious truck driver's wife vibes. Laughter followed. Light, calm, but dripping in contempt. Whispers grew louder among the guests. I noticed Chase's mother raise a hand to her mouth. An older woman in the back shook her head slowly. Madison stood paralyzed in the aisle, bouquet trembling in her hands. The next clip played audio captured in a coffee shop from a video call Madison had made, not realizing my phone was recording. Gabriel, he's so predictable. Just tear up a little and he'll reach for his wallet. He's paying for this whole wedding because he thinks he's some kind of movie hero. I just nod and say he's the best brother ever. Ha ha. That laugh, harsh and ugly, landed like a knife. Chase's face began to shift. I saw the light in his eyes dim as he looked at Madison. The event manager seemed panicked, moving toward the screen controls. But Isaac from the wings subtly signaled, "Let it play." Everything had been programmed. Nothing would stop until I said so. The final part was a short clip, but it hit like a hammer. I don't need kids cluttering my wedding photos. I want to look at the pictures and see people who matter. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the corner of the room. It was Emily. She had just arrived, standing at the entrance with the two kids, holding Abby close as the little girl trembled. I hadn't warned my wife about any of this, but there was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet strength born from years of enduring. I stepped onto the stage. The video faded. The lights softened. The room felt as tense as a drawn bowstring. I adjusted my collar and said clearly, "Madison, I'm sorry you had to hear yourself." She spun toward me, furious. "You set me up?" I shrugged. "I just played back your words. No edits, no embellishments." She lunged, but Chase stepped in. "Was all of that real?" he asked. Madison opened her mouth to deny it, but she couldn't. The entire room had heard it. No one could unhear that footage. I looked Chase in the eye. "You're a grown man. You have the right to choose who stands beside you." He didn't answer, but the way he looked at Madison told everyone what came next. I pulled a gold envelope from my jacket pocket. "And this is the transfer document for the apartment. It was meant to be a wedding gift, but it no longer feels appropriate." I handed the envelope to a man in a gray suit, a legal representative from the charity Hope Roots, an organization that provides housing for struggling farm families. That apartment now belongs to them, because people who truly deserve a home don't look down on others. Madison stood stunned, crushing her bouquet in her hands. The wedding collapsed. The ceremony unraveled in the soft murmurs of guests who had once cheered for her. I turned and walked toward Emily. She reached for my hand, silent. I understood. This wasn't just the end of a ceremony. It was the beginning of an awakening. And Madison, she had finally received what she'd been giving to others for years: coldness, shame, and erasure. Madison stood frozen in the aisle, her wedding gown wrinkled, the lace hem stained with duck feathers and crumbs from the shattered cake. Her bouquet had fallen, the white tulip petals scattered like pieces of the perfect image she'd crafted. The entire hall sat in breathless silence. I glanced at the Hope Roots representative and gave a small nod. He stepped forward, holding up a file stamped with an official red seal. "I confirmed that the apartment at 470 Peachtree Avenue has been legally and fully transferred to our organization," he announced. "Next week, the first family, a couple with 3 children, will move in." Gasps filled the air. A woman behind me whispered, "Oh my God, that's the most expensive penthouse in Fulton County." Madison's face contorted. She staggered forward in stained heels. "Gabriel, no. You can't do this." I looked at her. No anger, no sorrow, just an icy clarity. "I can, and I did," I said. "You had a chance to choose decency. Instead, you threw away the most valuable thing a person can have: respect for their family." Chase remained still, expression blank. He stared at Madison as if seeing a stranger. "Chase," she whispered, voice cracking. I didn't think it would end like this." He shook his head and stepped back. "No, Madison, you thought I was a puppet. You thought money and status could cover everything. But no one in my family will accept someone who tears others down to lift herself up." Chase's parents, Mr. Bill and Mrs. Lorraine, stood by the champagne table. Mrs. Lorraine quietly set her glass down and turned away. Mr. Bill gave me a slight nod, draped his coat over his wife's shoulders, and walked out. Chase looked at Madison one last time. The apartment's gone. The reputation is gone. But you know what's worse? I'm gone too. He slipped off the wedding band, placed it gently on the ceremony table. No speeches, no theatrics, just finality. His leather shoes echoed down the marble hallway until they disappeared behind the tall wooden doors. Madison crumbled to the floor right where she had stood proudly less than an hour earlier. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. No spotlight, no cameras. Only the eyes of onlookers, some shocked, some pitying. The very thing she once used to shame others. A man in a dark gray suit walked up beside me and whispered, "Never seen a wedding like this in my life." I gave a soft chuckle. Me neither. What I didn't say was that this was the only wedding I'd ever attended without offering my blessing. Just then, Emily came to my side and gently took my hand. Abby and Noah stood behind her, their hands clasped tightly. I knelt to look at my children, then turned back to the chaos behind us. "Let's go home," I told my wife. She nodded. No one stood in our way. Not a word was spoken as we left what had once been a stage for pretense. On the drive back, Abby sat in the back seat and asked, "Dad, why is Aunt Madison so sad?" I glanced at the rearview mirror. Her eyes were wide and innocent, but not naive. I replied, "Because some people spend their whole lives building castles out of reputation and forget they were supposed to build them with kindness first." No one said another word, but in my heart, something finally felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because I had finally shed the burden of sacrificing for someone who never deserved it. Just 3 days after the wedding disaster, the full video went viral across social media. The first clip came from an anonymous TikTok account, captioned simply, "The price of a luxury bride." 6 million views in less than 12 hours. Hashtags like "runaway fiancé" and "luxury gone wrong" trended nationwide. The internet didn't hold back. Clips of Madison calling Emily a truck driver's wife, or saying, "I don't want my wedding to look like a daycare," were turned into memes, spreading like wildfire. A YouTube channel even made a compilation set to dramatic background music, drawing hundreds of thousands of comments, most filled with outrage, mockery, or secondhand embarrassment. People who once idolized the stylish communications exec now dubbed her the queen of classist snobbery. Even a luxury handbag brand she'd once partnered with issued a statement severing ties, citing that her public image no longer aligned with the values of our brand. The first blow came professionally. 3 days after the wedding, Madison received a suspension notice. The PR firm where she'd worked for over 6 years, the same one she used to boast about, claiming the whole marketing team answers to me, called her into an emergency meeting. No one spoke up for her. No colleagues defended her. The audio, the visuals, the arrogance, everything was undeniable. By the end of the week, her company email was deactivated, her employment was terminated for severely damaging the reputation and integrity of the organization. Next came the friends. The girls who used to appear alongside Madison on Instagram, posing with cocktails, smiling brightly in matching bridesmaid dresses, quietly untagged themselves. Some even blocked her account. No one replied to her messages anymore. The Sunday brunches in Buckhead disappeared. Event invitations, brand collabs, product endorsements completely gone. The penthouse apartment in downtown Atlanta was no longer hers. Now, Madison had to move into a small studio inside a run-down apartment complex in East Point, far from the places she used to brag were for the outdated middle class. I didn't know all this because I was keeping tabs or taking pleasure in it. I knew because one day she sent me an email with a subject line that simply read, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I heard more details from a few old acquaintances, the same people Madison used to ignore at parties, who suddenly became the ones she turned to for advice. They said she had applied to over 10 different PR firms, but her resume was rejected every time. One hiring manager admitted, "We can't risk hiring someone so publicly shunned." A small fashion brand once considered her for a store manager role, But after watching the video, they declined without hesitation. After 3 months, Madison started working part-time as a promotional rep for a frozen meal company. No more designer dresses, no more imported Italian leather bags. Every morning she stood outside a local grocery store, handing out flyers to passers-by. Some recognized her, some gave her looks of contempt, others offered sad smiles and walked away. By winter, I received a package from an unfamiliar return address. Inside was an unused wedding photo album and a handwritten letter. I thought I was stronger than everything, but I was just good at wearing a mask. I lost everything, Gabriel, and I know I deserve it. But there are nights I still dream of you walking out of that ballroom, holding Emily's hand, while I just stood there, watching, like someone on the outside of her own life. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and locked it, not to hide it, but to remind myself some lessons never need to be repeated. A lesson about pride, and the price of looking down on those who once gave you everything. The grand opening of the fourth restaurant location happened on a breezy early April day. The atmosphere was lively, with guests filling the outdoor courtyard. String lights hung between maple trees just starting to leaf out, creating a warm but elegant space. Emily helped out at the minibar, while Abby and Noah ran circles near the open kitchen, where the chef was torching desserts with dramatic puffs of cold smoke. I was greeting guests when the front door opened. The woman who stepped in wasn't on any guest list. Her hair was disheveled, face pale, clutch faded, clutching a frayed canvas bag. Madison. She stood motionless for a few seconds, eyes scanning the room like she was trying to blend into a place that once felt like hers. Guests began to whisper. Some recognized her, some looked away. No one waved, no one approached. I wasn't surprised. I knew it was only a matter of time before she showed up. When her eyes locked with mine, I didn't flinch. I walked over, keeping a polite distance. "Gabrielle," she said softly. Her voice was barely audible. "Congratulations, the place. It's beautiful." I nodded. "Thanks. Why are you here?" Madison swallowed. She looked around, then lowered her head. "I need a job." I didn't react. She continued, faster now. "I've applied everywhere. No one will hire me. Front desk, server, cleaning, I have experience. I'll relearn everything. I just need a place to start. Somewhere, please, Gabriel." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. The woman who once stood center stage under hundreds of admiring eyes, who assumed the world beneath her feet was permanent, now stripped of all glamour, standing in front of me with nothing but exhaustion and desperation. I led her to a quiet corner in the back where the lights were softer and the noise faded. Then I sat, arms folded, eyes steady. "You say you want a fresh start, but let me ask, have you truly changed? Or are you just out of options?" She froze. I cut her off. "I haven't forgotten how you looked at Emily like hired help, how you stood at your own wedding and erased my entire family, then smiled when I handed you a gift. Everything that followed, you brought it on yourself." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm not asking for money. I have nothing left." I nodded. "And that still hasn't woken you up. If I weren't me, if it were someone else with a restaurant and the power to hire, you'd still be here, still bowing your head." "Gabriel," she choked, "I have no one." I looked away for a moment, then answered clearly. "I can't help you, not out of spite, but because I need every person in this place to understand what kindness is worth. I can't bring back someone who stomped all over that just because life closed all her other doors." Madison stood silent for a long while. Then she gave a small, weary nod. "I understand." She stood up, eyes red but no longer pleading. No angry tears, no blame, just a woman walking out of the wreckage she built herself. I watched her fade into the night streets, no one turning to look back. I didn't feel triumphant, only at peace. Because some doors, once shut, don't need to reopen. They just need to remind you that forgiveness doesn't mean repeating a mistake. That morning, I was sitting at the coffee bar behind the restaurant, prepping for a meeting with the operations team when my phone rang. The screen read, "Mom, home." Still saved under the old name from before I moved out. I paused for a few seconds, then answered, "Gabriel," my mother said, her voice hesitant. "Do you have a minute?" I said nothing. "Just a moment," she added. I sighed. "Go ahead, Mom." She hesitated for a long moment, then spoke in a soft tone, so different from the woman who used to dismiss Emily's hurt with comments like, "She's just sensitive," or "Don't mind Madison. She's still immature." "Your father and we saw everything, the video, the wedding. He couldn't sleep that night. We never realized how much you'd been through." I stayed silent. Then I heard my father clear his throat, and he spoke. Something he rarely did. "Gabriel, you did the right thing. The way you protected your family, it made me think hard about a lot of things." Mom continued, "We were wrong. Your father and I always thought Madison was fragile and needed protection. But while we were holding on to her, we let go of you, your sacrifices, the times you stood behind the scenes and quietly did everything. We never truly saw them." I sat still, staring at the now cold cup of coffee in front of me. For many years I had longed to hear those words. Just one admission, a sincere apology, a bit of fairness for Emily and the kids. But now that it came, it didn't feel the way I had imagined. I replied slowly, "Thank you for saying that." A quiet sigh came through the phone. "So, can our family start over?" I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then answered, my voice calm but firm. "I already have a family, Emily, Abby, and Noah. With them, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to carry the weight or stay silent just to keep fake peace." My mother's voice caught. "But we're blood. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to trample others and call it love," I replied. Silence on the other end. A silence stretched tight like the years of pressure that had once lived on my shoulders. "I don't hold a grudge," I continued, "but I'm not going back. No weekly dinners, no pretending the past didn't happen. I need peace. Unconditional, unspoken, and I already have it." I hung up before she could say anything else. No anger, no trembling hands, no guilt. Just a clean ending, neat, clear, with no room left for broken promises. That afternoon, I picked up Abby from art class. She proudly showed me her latest drawing, a small house with a backyard and 3 people eating pie under a tree. Me, Emily, and her. No one else was in the picture. I didn't ask why. I just nodded and said, "It's beautiful, Princess." We stopped by the ice cream shop on the corner, then walked home, where Emily was baking in the kitchen and Noah was building something with Legos on the floor. I looked at the scene. Not picture perfect, not flashy, not staged. But it was family. It was home. It was my life. Simple, honest, and free from the tangled strings of the past. I didn't need their forgiveness. I just needed them to no longer hold the power to make me seek it. Freedom, sometimes it's not about walking away. It's about not letting anyone walk back in and hurt you again. Gabriel had spent his youth sacrificing for family, believing blood ties were unbreakable. But betrayal and disrespect taught him that family means nothing without mutual respect. By standing up for his wife and children, he finally freed himself from a toxic bond. Now, Gabriel no longer seeks validation, because to him, a real family is built on love, not hierarchy. What do you think of Gabriel's decision? Was he too harsh, or was it necessary to protect his family? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories like this one.